Right, I hope you can hear me, folks. Just doing the standard sound and vision check. If everything's coming down okay, if someone could just pop a message in the live chat to let me know, that would be fantastic. And I will see you at 7:30. Hello, redoing the mic check. I did it about 5-10 minutes ago, and there were 7 people, according to this, watching at the time, but nobody responded to say they could hear it. So I just need to double check that that everything's working. If it is, if someone just put a message in the live chat for me, and I'll see you at the past. Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Ian's Studio Live, the 58th edition. This is week 51 of doing the show, so we are just a couple of weeks away from celebrating 1 year of having this live stream. What a year it's been. Anyway, welcome everyone to the show. I don't think I've welcomed people by name in the live chat, but the names I can see in there: Terry, hi, Peter, Raymond. Those of you are there in the chat. If anyone else is watching, just say hi in the chat so I know that you're there. That would be fantastic. This could potentially be quite a short show tonight because I've not got any videos to play in. I've got a little bit of news and I've got our main topic, and I haven't got any pre-supplied Q&A. So it's a great chance for you to come up with your own Q&A, get them in the live chat, so that I've got something to talk about tonight. Otherwise, I could be finishing very quickly tonight. No, I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take me to go through those three composition techniques. I do want to go through them in more detail than I have ever done before. This isn't just a use the rule of thirds. This is how does the rule of thirds work? How does lead-in lines work? What does framing actually mean? So there's a lot of meat in there, but it would be nice to break it up with perhaps a little bit of Q&A. So anyway, let's get underway, and let me do my standard intro. So if you are new to the live stream, then well, first of all, do say hello in the live chat, but just take a moment and hit the subscribe button here in YouTube and hit the little notification bell so that you get that message popping up when we go live, and you get notified when the other videos go up there on the channel, on there. And if you're watching on the replay, please leave me a comment in the comments. And when you're watching any of the other videos on any of the three channels, then leave a comment there as well, because again, that helps my visibility within YouTube. It helps me know that somebody's actually watched it rather than just clicked on and gone, "Oh, what the hell's that?" and clicked off. Because you never know, we never know. And of course, as I say every time, hit the like button, hit the like button. It's a little bit of fun, but with a serious point behind it, because that does help with the YouTube algorithm. It helps them to know what videos to present to people. I want them to present mine to people. So the more people who hit like will help that. And I'm trying to get to 17 likes by the end of the intro. Doubt I'll get it today. I've only got 12 viewers at the moment. I'm guessing some of my regulars are going to be watching on replay. At least I hope you are. All right, okay. So, yeah, thanks to everyone who's been sharing links, in particular Peter. Every week he shares links to the live stream, so thank you for that on there. And in case you don't know, for the benefit of anyone watching for the first time, these are twice weekly shows at the moment. Sunday nights, as tonight, are based around tutorials, teaching, helping you with your photography in that sense, and Q&A, of which I can see there appears to be some cues coming into the chat. So I'll have a look at those in a moment. Wednesday nights are all about feedback on your photos, and if you want your photos to be talked about on a Wednesday night, please send them to feedback@ians-studio.co.uk. And the reason I asked for that is because that means I'm more likely to get the shooting data. I'm more likely to have the full resolution to be able to help with things like focusing issues that you might have had. Surprising how often that comes up, actually. So if you've got the images, do send them there, the ones that you want feedback on. Other than that, I'll pull them from the Facebook feed. on there. And talking of Facebook, that's the link to it. If you're not a member of the group, do join, because it's where we keep the conversation going. It's where I get photos from to talk about, and it's a really cool place to hang out with some of the photographers as well on there. So in case you don't know, the shows, whoa, it looks like even my display is having trouble at the moment. I've got that yellow warning about not enough data and the egg timer of death on my screen. So hopefully you're getting this. Hopefully it's just buffering it rather than completely stopping what it's displaying. Right, yeah, the shows are staying on YouTube for quite a while. So if you've missed one and need to catch up, you can go and have a look at them. Eventually they will be cut down with the full versions in my academy and just extracts on YouTube. If you're finding what I'm doing in terms of all this free content, the free free videos on YouTube, the live streams and things like that, and if you want to say thank you in a financial way to help keep things going, then that's the link to be able to do it. buymeatea.com/Ian Butty. It's basically buy me a coffee that a lot of YouTubers use, but I don't drink coffee, so I got the URL renamed. And tonight's cup of tea comes from Graham Hunter. So cheers, Graham. This is the second time. Graham has the distinction of being the first person to have his name on the mug a second time. So if you have bought me a cup of tea and your name's never appeared on the mug, let me know. The chances are you've probably just missed when it was on there. But if you missed it and you think I've missed you out, let me know and I'll check into it. But cheers to Graham for tonight's cuppa. Right. Yeah, I've got a little thank you tied in with tonight's show as well. And that's one of my inspiration sheets, all about lead-in lines, which takes a similar theme to what I'm going to be talking about tonight. But what I'm talking about tonight goes into more detail than even the inspiration sheet on there. But I will send you that out after the show. Anyone who buys me a cuppa between now and next Saturday will get that as well. Quite a lot of you have got credits to your name. Don't let that stop you from buying me another cuppa, but you will get this as soon as I send it out after the show. One of the things connected with the Facebook group is I change the profile picture once a week immediately after the show, and I announce the replacement image at the end of the show. So please stay tuned and find out whether it's your image at the end of tonight's show. My newsletter, I mention this each week, and I can actually tell you today I did send out a copy of the newsletter, first one this year I think actually, but basically going through all the videos that I've output this year, which is quite a lot. I think it was 23, not counting the live streams that have been published this year already, and we're only, what, 2/3 the way through February. So that's been going well, and there's more already scheduled for next week as well. So keep an eye on those. Incidentally, if you didn't receive my newsletter today and you're watching this, then you need to go to that link. There's a hyperlink down below the video. You do need to go there and subscribe to it to make sure that you get it, because usually when I send those out, there's additional things that don't appear in the live stream. So it is a good place to get extra information. So do go and sign up for that. Before I get on to what's on the show tonight, well, no, I'll do it afterwards. On the show tonight, we've got live Q&A. Good to see that some questions are coming in. I'm going to look really in depth at composition tonight, and it's the rule of thirds, lead-in lines, and framing. Not necessarily in that order, but I really want to go through those, talk about them, try and show you examples about how each of those work, and to really help you with composing your images. As I did have somebody ask me if I could do a session on composition. So this is the start of it, and I'll come back to this again probably next month. So doesn't look like we've beaten the record on number of likes. We've gone up to 11. That's not bad. That's not bad on there. Right. Just to say, news-wise, connected with the newsletter, I've had quite a few videos go up on online over the last week or so, including one which is entitled Photographing Doctor Who or something similar along those lines, which was a demo video for the Pixar Pro blocks, and really pleased with that one, and the 3 glass splash video. And I really want to just draw your attention to those 2 videos. If you haven't seen them yet, go and have a look at them. They're brand new. They're not things which you will have seen on the live stream. They are sort of brand new items and new explanations of things about how things work. And the one with the blocks is there's a bit of a Photoshop tutorial as part of that as well. And those of you who've been watching on the Wednesday nights, now I'm starting to incorporate more Photoshop stuff in there. Again, it's what you guys have asked for. You've asked for more Photoshop stuff, so I'm trying to put it in there. So go and have a look at those if you haven't done so already. Right, these questions in chat. Let's have a look at what we've got in there. Right, so Peter is asking a question. Let's bring this all up. Peter says, can a composition be excellent if it does not conform to the official rules? Yes, it can. I'm actually going to talk about that as we get into it. It's quite towards the end of it, but there's there's a pair of images that I want to show you which really address that question. The thing about these official rules, there's no such thing as an official rule. They're just guidelines on how to compose an image. But the important thing I would say is learn how to use them, because once you know how they work, you can actually take an informed decision on how to break them and how to work against them. Because it is very obvious when you look at a photograph, the difference between somebody who is breaking the rules for effect and somebody who is breaking the rules because they don't know them. And you might say to me, well, how can you tell? You just can. As you get more experience, and those of you who are experienced photographers will know what I mean on this. The more experienced you are, I don't think Gary Platt is watching tonight, but he sometimes breaks the rules of composition with his images. And I know instantly when he's done it. And you can tell it's a deliberate thing rather than, oh, that was just, I wasn't, rather than him not thinking about the shot. It's very, very clear. And that's because he has spent a lot of time working with the rules of composition to actually get them to work. So yes, an image can be a good image if it even when it breaks the rules. But what you often find is when you deliberately break one rule, it then works because you've actually either inadvertently or deliberately used a different rule. So for example, the rule of thirds. We often talk about don't stick your image your subject directly in the center, put it on the 1/3 lines. But sometimes, and I've shown images here on the live stream with this, where you put something bang in the middle and it just works. And that, you might say, well, that's breaking the rule of thirds. It might be breaking the rule of thirds, but actually, most of the times when that works and it's bang in the middle, it's because it's triggered a different rule, either because it's filling the frame or because putting it in the middle gives you the special case of repetition, which is a reflection where it may not be a true reflection, it may be mirroring either side, where something one side mirrors the other. And that kind of thing, then you've broken one rule and created another as part of it. So the thing I would say, Peter, about images, what you need to start doing is when you see an image that works, and you know, for the time being, ignore your own photos, just look at everybody else's images, perhaps in the Facebook group, go through them and start thinking about which rules of composition are actually being used in there. And almost certainly you can find one or two rules for every image that works. But for some of them, you'll also be able to say, well, that really works, but it has broken the rule of thirds, or it's broken some other rule in there. So the answer to your question, the quick answer is yes, but there's usually another reason why it does work. It's very rare when you find an image that just works and is a really good image and you can't find a single rule of composition that it's actually adhered to. Now, does this mean the photographer has always thought about those rules when he created the image? No, maybe not. I know often when I'm creating images, I'm not always thinking about the rules of composition. Well, I am thinking about them, but I'm not consciously thinking about them. And the rules of composition, you need to get them to a stage where you're doing it automatically. And the best example I can use of this, I think I've used this story before, this explanation before, it's like learning to drive a car. When you first start out learning to drive a car, you have your instructor sitting next to you who's telling you brake, clutch, gear, handbrake, and they're giving you the prompts on all of that. And after a while, you're starting to do that yourself. You're thinking brake, clutch, gears, handbrake, and all that's going on. Then after you're more experienced, you're driving down the road and you're doing all that, and you might be thinking about what you're going to be cooking for dinner. You might be thinking about the meeting that you're going to. You're not thinking brake, clutch, gears, handbrake as you're going along. You're just doing it automatically. And it's the same with rules of composition. The more you think about it early on and you spend that time, the more it becomes so ingrained into you that you just do it automatically. So sometimes you don't have time to consciously think about it. If you're doing, as I do, I say used to do, theatre photography, then when things are happening on stage, you don't have time to go, right, well, shall I use the rule of thirds for this? Am I going to use a lead-in line? You just see something and you go click, and you've got the shot, and you're working on that instinctive level. And that only comes by practice and continually shooting and continually looking at photographs and analysing them. I spend a lot of time looking at my photos, analysing them, because I need to be able to present things like this. So that all works back into my subconscious, that I don't have to consciously think about it. So yeah, the answer is yes. The answer to the question is definitely yes. Right, looking at the other questions in here. Right, Terry wants to know what Lightroom plugins I use. I will come on to that later. I'll do that one later because I might need to pull up Lightroom to do that one, to show you. What else have we got? Walter, hi Walter. By the way, Walter, did you watch the 3 glass splash video? You make a guest appearance in it. When and why would you use Fibonacci and golden ratio when composing? Right, I'm not going to answer that one tonight. This series on composition, you'll notice I labelled it Composition 1. I'm going to do some more, and further on I want to talk about golden ratios and golden spirals and all that, and that's all connected with Fibonacci sequences. I want to deal with that one in a live stream all on its own. I'll be perfectly honest, it's not one that I consciously use a lot, and therefore I need to spend more time thinking about it before I talk about it, to actually get that to that place where I can explain it simply. It's a strange thing, actually. Somebody once said, the hardest thing in the world is to explain something simply. It's easier to explain something in a complex way than it is to explain something in a simple way. And I don't feel I'm at the point where I can do justice to the golden ratio stuff without doing off the top of my head. I need to spend time preparing that. In answer to right, Walter, in answer to your question, you said where did you didn't see the water splash video? Right, 2 places to look for it. First of all, Walter, I sent out a newsletter today. There's a link to it in there. If you have a look at the YouTube channel you are currently watching on, and if you have a look on videos underneath there, you'll find it's one of the most recently uploaded videos. If you have a look in the Facebook group, hey, this is 3. Look in the Facebook group, I've got a link to it in there as well. The photograph is 3 glasses with that sluice of water coming out. It was the event you were at, thus the fact that you made a guest appearance on there. And it covers how I made the rig for it. So it's not a short video. It's not a huge long one, but it goes through. I recorded actually building the rig to create it, and there's a couple of seconds of the event that was associated with it as well. So that's where you would find it. Right, okay, so let's head over and let's start talking about composition properly. And we're going to look at, as I said, 3 techniques. I want to dispel a couple of misunderstandings as part of it, and I want to encourage you to try and learn these techniques, and by learn I mean try. Try and for each of them, and here's the challenge for you folks, over the next week, why not challenge yourself to create at least one image, new image, that uses each of these techniques. So 3 images, 1 for each of them. And just challenge yourself to do that, because that's how you will learn. So the 3 techniques are the rule of thirds, lead-in lines, and framing. Let's start with rule of thirds. And as I've said already, these are guidelines. They are not rules set in stone that you have to follow. They are guidelines to help you become a better photographer. I would encourage you to follow them. And once you are familiar with them, then you can learn to break them. And the idea of the rule of thirds is it moves you away from this idea of putting your subject in the center of the frame. One of the things I really hate about modern cameras and the focusing system is you've got this major focusing point bang in the middle. And what that does is it encourages novices to think, well, that's where it's telling me to focus, so I will put my subject under that focusing point. And sometimes you've got a circle around it as well, and it's saying, right, put your subject there. And that's not necessarily the best place to stick your subject. And the rule of thirds is all about getting you away from doing that. And what you need to do is imagine on your image that your image has a noughts and crosses board overlaid on it. And the aim, as I'm sure you know, is to place significant elements of your image at the intersections of those lines, or along the lines. So here's an example for you. I want you to notice where the eye is located on there. So imagine we've got the checkerboard over the top of this, the noughts and crosses board. And what's the most significant thing when you photograph a person? It's the eye. So we position the eyes, or in this case, the one eye, at a 1/3 level, a third of the way down from the top. And we place our subject a third of the way into the image, either a third from the left or a third from the right with it. And with this one, if I draw that board over the top, you can see the eye ends on that intersection. That's the use of the rule of thirds. Also, look towards the background on this. Where's the horizon? It follows the lower third lines. My model, my subject, is Kaylee, is down on the third line down the left-hand side. So that's where you need to locate. That's what the rule of thirds is all about. Now, what I want to do is go through a whole load of images and just draw out a few things about them and about the rule of thirds and about how it works. So the first thing to say is you don't have to be exact with it. It's not all about making sure that your subject is exactly on the third line. This image worked. She's just off. Now, Walter's probably going to say, yeah, but that's now on the golden ratio position. And yes, it is. And this is why I tend not to think about the golden ratio positionings, because I tend to think rule of thirds because it's easier to visualize that and be a little bit loose with it. So you can see where the intersection points are on here. None of the intersection points are the significant bit. However, our subject is just off center towards the third line. So don't get hung up over it's got to be exactly on the third line. And we'll see as we go through. I've got the checkerboard, the noughts and crosses board over all the images for this rule of thirds section. And you can see how accurate I am or not with them as we go through. So here, another example where you don't actually have to be that precise. This one's a little bit closer though. So let's put the board on it, and you can see here the horizon's more or less on the third line. The display is on the third line, more or less. The guys in the cherry picker Well, they're one side of the line, and the base unit is the other side. So you could argue they're on there, but on the third line itself, no, there's nothing. So it's a little bit loose on it, and that's one of the things I want to sort of emphasize with rule of thirds. Don't get hung up on getting it precise. Use it as a guideline, and then let the rest of the composition fall into place and to help you with it. Just imagine that image if I put the horizon through the middle of it. If I'd basically I'd be including a lot of foreground that's not adding anything to it. So I'm using it all as a guideline. Here again, that one I mentioned about the horizon on the 1/3 line, that's a really good one to get used to. And you can see here, hopefully, yeah, almost exactly on the 3rd line. This is Bequia in the Caribbean, and the most wonderful sunset I think I've ever seen there. So yeah, it's on the 3rd line, but that's the only thing that's actually on the 3rd line in there. So I've spread out the objects. I've just got one part of it on the 3rd line. And sometimes you don't have to get hung up about having everything on 3rd lines with it. It's just enough to get the boats, the horizon on there, without having to try and artificially get the boats on there, and it still works. Simply because we've got so many of the boats. Yes, I could have moved the camera around a bit and zoomed out a bit, and perhaps got the setting sun on the 3rd line, but actually I don't think it would have improved the image much. The other thing to say about those horizons, we think of it as being at the lower third, and the examples up till now have all been that, but it doesn't have to be. Let's have a look at this one. Okay, it's not bang on by any means, but it's nearer the top third than the bottom third by a long way, certainly well above the midpoint. And notice the actual vertical, the left third, that goes through the middle of the mount of the hill. Where's the dip? The middle of the dip is more or less on the other 3rd point. So as I've composed it, and did that go through my mind as I was composing it? Absolutely not. My instincts took over, and I was putting the horizon high up, and I was balancing out the hill with the valley, and balancing them out either side of the image. They've ended up approximately on the 3rd lines. So it's just getting that into you when you're composing. Start off thinking about, can I balance things out? I've got one coming up. It's all about balance between the different parts of the rule of thirds. Again, here, it's just the arms that are on the 1/3 line. The statue's off. Again, is it on the golden ratio? I don't know, because I haven't got an overlay for it, but it's possibly more towards that. So again, it's slightly off, but it's still the rule of thirds that's into play here that's making this image work. When you have a person on a rule of thirds and they're not looking straight at camera, have them looking into the empty space. And you can see here, my subject's on the 3rd line, her eyes are on the 3rd lines, and she's looking into the empty space. And that's one of the guiding principles. Does that mean that everyone's always got to be looking into the empty space? No, you can do it, you can break that. And sometimes it asks a question. The expression on somebody's face as they might be, if she wasn't just looking up into the rain which was streaming into her face, maybe she had a look of horror on her face, then you could potentially position her nearer the frame looking out. So it asks the question, what is she horrified about? And then with that, we'd be putting her on the other third line, looking out. But that is a deliberate decision to do it for a particular effect. If you haven't got a reason for doing it, it's back to what I say, follow the guidelines. Put your subject on the third lines, let the eyes go through the third lines. Here's the one about balance that I wanted to talk about. Now, it's not exact, but you'll notice that what I've balanced here approximately is my subject is top left and is relatively close to that 1/3 intersection, and balancing her is some of the scrumpled up paper at bottom right, and to try and get that balance in the image. And using rule of thirds to do that, if you can imagine that grid, that will help you with getting that balance in there, whether it's exactly on the intersections or whether it's, well, I'm trying to balance this, so I've got one bit just above a third line, so the corresponding bit needs to be just a little bit below, and doing it that way, it helps you think about balance within an image using those rule of thirds. Again, another example here, and this is one that you perhaps initially don't see the rule of thirds in there, but when I draw the line, notice the bow is exactly on a rule of third. The eyes are, well, just about on the 1/3 line. So it's following all that, but its different elements are placed along those lines, and that helps make the image work. And the final thing to say about this is, if you've got it wrong, you haven't managed to do it in camera, and I would always encourage you, try and do this in camera if you can. But if for some reason you can't, then recompose in post-production. So here's an example where I couldn't do it in camera. This was in the Falkland Islands, one of the penguin colonies there, and I was tracking this penguin who was running towards the camera, and I needed to keep him under my sensor, my central sensor, to be able to track him. And that meant he ended up in the middle, which is not a good place to put him. And you can see it's not a good place. So in post-production, what have I done? Well, you can see he's bang in the middle there. But with a little bit of recomposing in post-production, can you see now how, again, he's on the 1/3 vertical line, but we've got that balance as well, that his feet are below the lower line by the same amount that the head is above, creating that balance in the image with it. And so rule of thirds will help you with balancing an image when you need to balance bits. So if I'd positioned him still on that line, but with the head much closer to the top and a lot of space at the bottom, it wouldn't have been quite as balanced an image. But using the rule of thirds, you can see the necessary balance to put in there. And even with images that don't look like they're a rule of thirds image, this one doesn't, because it's at an angle. That's not a rule of thirds image, is it? But wait until you see when I put the grid on there, and you can now see that her face is on a third line. The hand holding the spaghetti up here, approximately on the third line. The plate of spaghetti not far off the third line with that. So it is in there, but most significantly, the most significant part of the image is our subject's face, and that is on the 1/3 intersection, the strongest point of composition on there. So even with an image like that, the rule of thirds comes into play. Right, let me have a cuppa, a slug of my cuppa, and I'll go and have a look at what's in Q&A. Right, so what have we got? Nothing new in Q&A at the moment. So at this point, I'm going to answer as best I can Terry's question about what Lightroom plugins do I use. I use loads of them. I don't always have them all enabled. One I use is LRMogrify, which allows me, I've talked about this one before, allows me to put borders around and put fancy text onto images. I use, or used to use, a plugin for uploading to Zenfolio. Right, what I'm going to do, while I'm trying to think of these, I'm just going to start up Lightroom, and that will hopefully jog my memory. Actually, no, I've got a better way of doing that. Rather than opening them in Lightroom, I'll go to the folder where I store them all, and I can talk through them. Right, plugins. Right, okay, so yeah, right, let me go down through here. Ones that I have used, you can see how many there are in here. A good one that I've used for organizing and for trying to find particular groups of images. Filtering within Lightroom, you can only filter on certain categories. There's a plugin called Any Filter, which means you can filter on just about any criteria, and I use that quite a bit. Right, I use quite a lot from Jeffrey Friedel, his plugins. A Bag of Goodies does lots of different things in Lightroom. It's just odd little routines in there that I use. Right, Flickr ones I've used. Here's an interesting one. I haven't got it enabled at the moment, but Focus Points plugin, and it produces an overlay of the focus points, so you can see which focus points were active when the image was taken. I really ought to get that one enabled because I think that would be helpful when I'm providing feedback on images which have been emailed to me, to have a look where you were focusing at the time, how you were focusing. Right, LRMogrify. LR Blog I'm not using so much now, but that's one where you could output to WordPress directly. What I now use is LR Transporter. LR Transporter does a similar thing. It allows you to create a text file based on the metadata that you've got with your images, and with a little bit of careful messing around with that, I've created an export where I can export a CSV file with links to exported thumbnails with the metadata, which gives me a sheet for proofreading. My wife, because I'm dyslexic, if I'm submitting stuff to stock libraries, I get her to proofread them. And this allows me to print out a sheet that she can proofread. She much prefers to do it on paper than on screen on there. Another really good one from Jeffrey Friedel is Preview Extraction. And I've used this when I've been on cruises, where if it allows me, if I haven't got a smart preview enabled, in fact, it will work with smart previews as well. But if the photograph that you have in the catalogue, you haven't got the original file there, and if you haven't got a smart preview for it, but you want a copy of that image, for, in my case, for presentations when I'm on a ship, it will allow you to extract a version based on the preview that's within Lightroom, because the previews will still be there. I'm not talking smart previews, the standard previews. It will go and grab that for you, Yeah, it's reduced quality, but it's enough for a presentation if I'm doing a slideshow. So I found that one really useful. Any filter I've talked about. Oh yeah, there was a Twitter plugin for uploading directly to Twitter that I've used on there. There is another plugin that I use, well, two other plugins that I use more than any others I haven't yet talked about. And they're not on that list because they're stored elsewhere. One of them's down here because it shows up slightly differently. It's called LR Alamy. And what LR Alamy is a plugin which allows me to specify all the information for Alamy and upload directly to Alamy, all from within Lightroom. So I use that one quite a bit with my stock photography. The other one has a folder of its own because it's my own preset. And this one is the IMB metadata preset. And I've defined some extra metadata fields for blog posts, for Facebook posts and things like that. So I can store all that information within the Lightroom catalog. I have fields for sales information that I've created and things like that. And I'm working on a version of that to handle just theatre information. So it will be things like the director, the play name, the theatre name, and stuff like that. So I've then got that under my control. One thing just to be aware of with any of these plugins, though, that you're using within Lightroom, and that is, you might be putting stuff into the catalogue, but that will never be written out into the XMP data. And I think this is a big issue for Lightroom. And I only found out a couple of years ago that it was not actually writing all this extra metadata back out to the XMP files. It can do, there's technically no reason why it shouldn't, but Adobe haven't implemented it, which means you've got the only way of backing up all that information that you're providing in these extra plugins is by backing up your database, or to write something that will export that information. And that's on my to-do list, because I don't know how long I'll be staying with Lightroom. I have bad vibes about Lightroom every so often. They do things that I think, do they really have a long-term future for it? And you know, sometimes I wonder. So I need to find a way to get that out so that if I do have to change platforms for that I've got all my metadata and all that extra stuff I've put in there over. Right, Walter is saying sound at his end is muffled. My microphone is, let me do a couple of tests on the microphone. Well, it's definitely picking up on the microphone there. It's not picking up on the box down here on that. No, don't know about that one, Walter. Anybody else getting muffled sound? Could you let me know in the live chat, please, on there? Right. Hopefully that's sort of answered your question, Terry, about plugins. That was off the top of my head about the ones I use. So, right, let's carry on and look at framing as our next one. No, I'm not talking about picture frames with this. Oh, excuse me, dry mouth. No, not talking about picture frames like that. I'm talking about looking through things. Using another element in the image to surround or partially surround your subject. So for example here with this image of Marple Top Lock, we've got the canal bridge that it's framed by and its reflection, of course. Another very obvious example here, this is the image that was in the one of those videos I posted the last couple of days about using these blocks. And I framed the Doctor. She's in front of the arch, and the TARDIS is in front of the arch, but she's still technically framed by it. So again, an obvious way of doing it. Slightly less obvious is this example. This is still an example of framing, but it's not framing all the way around. It's just framing on the left-hand side. And this is one of the concepts I want to talk about a bit more with framing, is how we're using it in a more subtle way, where we're just using one side or two sides to actually frame our subject. Here with the treasury in Petra, framed by the rocks on the left-hand side. And again, just down the road from there in Wadi Rum, framing here is even more subtle. The framing is the person making the photo. It's the person on the left-hand side of the image. And here, again, it's a framing technique. And this is one where if you think about this shot without the framing element, you come to the conclusion the shot doesn't work. This only works. It's clearly a shot of the plane, but the framing element is what makes it work. This border at the bottom of the fence and the little bit of foreground, that's the element that makes it work. That's how we know what we're looking at. That's the element. Yeah, it's really what's making it work. And here, this theatre one, it's a framing element that's going on with this shot. What is it? Well, we've framed at the top with the theatre lights, and at the bottom with the dark edge of the stage on there, and that sandwiches our soldiers between there. So that's the framing that's going on with it. Here, again, a slightly more obvious one, and this is one you can easily find when you're looking for framing elements, is looking for trees. And all I did with this is I looked around and saw, right, there's a tree there, there's branches I can get in, and I pushed myself in to be able to get them into the frame to make the shot more interesting. I wanted to say autumn in here, which means I needed the golden leaves in there. And what better way than having them as my framing element? And sometimes something like this, we've actually got two lots of framing going on with this shot. We've got a framing in terms of the two people in the foreground are acting as framing elements, but we've got the light and the dark, and actually the light of the candle is being framed by the darkness that surrounds it. So you've got double framing going on with that, two framing elements. And this is one, going back to some of the things which we said earlier, about breaking one rule to make another rule. This is one where I broke the rule of thirds. I've put my subject bang in the middle, but in doing that, I broke the rule of thirds, but I've used other techniques. I've used a framing technique because I broke it on there. And there's also this balance in here as well. Notice that you've got the balance obviously either side of people either side, but we've got an up-down balance across here. Notice the crook of the neck here is balanced by the crook of the neck down here, and they're diametrically opposite with that within that composition. Again, framing can be done with light. It doesn't have to be an object. And here, by using a spotlight effect, all done in camera, we've got a framing going on here. And you can see I have used rule of thirds here, but I've used rule of thirds by just placing her on at the bottom third of the image on there. And light framing here, this is again double framing. It's a set on a play I was photographing, and little tables in the middle, or table in the middle, is framed first of all by the light in there, and the light itself is framed by the darkness surrounding it. So double framing going on, and that can add a dimension to an image. Notice rule of thirds in there as well, that we've got this intersection point near a third and our main subject on the table on the upper third there. Framing can be even more intangible. Here I've added smoke in post-production to act as a framing element on this this product shot for Lynx. Well, it wasn't for Lynx themselves, it was of a Lynx shower gel, but it was just a demo shot that I was producing. And you can see how adding in the smoke acts as a framing element to it with the shot. Of course, it's the same smoke flipped over on either side and then flipped again and with a filter on it to make it look as though it's reflected in the same way that the Lynx was. The Lynx shower gel was genuinely reflected, but I had to actually, in post-production, make it look as though the smoke was also reflected in there. Here's another example of framing, and this one's a little bit different. This is framed in the arms, and it works. Just the fact that the arms are like this is only works because it's a very tight shot. If it was a much wider shot and she got her arms like that, it wouldn't really have that framing effect to it. But it's only because it's in tight, and it gives us a framing actually on three sides. So we're framed down here, we're framed across the top, and then the bend of the elbow we're framed down here. So 3 out of 4 sides is framed by the arms. But there is another framing technique going on there, which I want to talk about. And that technique is vignettes. Vignettes, as you all know, are something I use regularly. And this is why it works, because it draws the eye into the middle. That's what framing's all about drawing the eye into the middle. And it's a subtle way of doing it without the viewer really knowing what's going on, without recognizing it. And so here you can see those darkened corners causes the eye to look more towards the middle. But vignetting, this is a vignetting, I don't think I did much in post-production on the vignette. Yes, I did things on the colour in post-production, but not on the vignette. That was fairly natural, and maybe emphasised it a little bit more, but this is a more natural looking vignette where it goes off into shadow at the edges, top, bottom and sides. So that's framing. I thought I had another example, obviously don't. So back to Q&A. I haven't seen any more questions coming in on Q&A at the moment. So let's move on to our third and final part of this in-depth look at composition, and let's look at lead-in lines this time. Okay, lead-in lines are probably fairly obvious. These are the lines which will lead you in to the image. And right, let's just deal with the elephant in the room at this point. It is lead-in line. It's not leading line, it's lead-in line. I know most of the websites you look at these days will say leading, but that's a new development. I've only started coming across that leading line phrase in about the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, we all talked about lead-in lines. And I actually went and had a look through some of my older photography textbooks, and I have not found one example of anyone using the phrase lead-in lines on there. It's always lead-in. So if that answers the question and anyone's wondering, it's lead-in, and I'm sticking with it. I'm an old fuddy-duddy, so tough if you don't like it. Yeah, we've got these two lead-in lines at the bottom. The classic one, the path leading you into your subject. But look more closely, there are two more in this image. It's an obvious one. It's the arms leading you in to the face, leading in to the face. Here, another obvious one, the barrier on the harbour side. It's a lead in, oops, of course I didn't put the arrows on this, it leads in to the ship on there. Also, rule of thirds, notice, ship is on the third line, horizon on approximately a third line. Another obvious one, the feathers, the stalks of the feathers are lead-in lines, drawing attention to the head of the peacock, drawing the eye to the head of the peacock. And again here, we're talking obvious ones. We'll come on to the less obvious ones in a moment. But here, we've got the fence acting as a lead-in to the Cathedral of the Northern Lights altar in Norway. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit blurry, because here the lead-in line is the camel. It's a lead-in to the image. Now, the thing about lead-in lines, technically speaking, they should lead you to the subject of your image. So you could argue that it's not a lead-in line because it is the subject itself. However, I would also argue that this is an image of camels, plural, and this is one camel which is a lead-in line to the other camels. Or you could say that this is the bulk of the camel and the head and the neck is the lead-in to it. So again, depends how you want to argue that one. But I'd say that is an example of a lead-in. And notice with most of these lead-in lines, they tend to come from the corners to the subject. And here we've got decking and we've got joins in the ceiling on board ship, acting as a lead-in to the performance. So we've got all these lines, they're drawing the eye inwards, but the line of the joins up here, those are our lead-in lines to the cast performing on deck at the on board. Which ship is it? I think that's Magellan. Yeah, I think it's Magellan on that, on there. So those are your examples of lead-in lines on that. Here's another, a little bit more subtle here. What's our subject? Our subject is really this area at the back. It's where the lights are, it's where the street's lit up, and our lead-in is the fence along the side, the railings along the side, and these lines on the pavement are also leading the eye to that location. That's the bit we want people to look at in our image. And here, again, this is one of those where it's that split-second decision to create the shot as it stands. And did I think lead-in lines as I was doing this? Well, sort of actually with this one, because I actually saw this scene twice, so I knew it was coming the second time. The first time I almost got it, the second time I did get it with the hands up. And I knew that was a compositional element that was going to work for the for the shot. So second time I saw it, I was on the lookout for it. And those arms act as lead in to the image. Now, yeah, that's very posed on there, but it can also work very naturally as well, as you can see with this one. The relaxed arm in the shot, that's a lead in to our subject. It draws the eye in. You could potentially argue that the leg here is a lead in as well. You can argue it another way and say it's strong diagonals as well, but that's a topic for another day, strong diagonals. And here, they don't have to be objects, as I've said, it could be lighting, and this is an unusual sort of lighting for it. Yes, we've got the lead in of the path, but we've got the lead in of these light trails to our group of walkers in the distance. Now, you can't see them properly because they're blurred. It was long exposure in order to get the light in the sky and to get these trails coming in. But yeah, that's another form of lead-in line for an image. Do lead-in lines have to come from the corner to the center, as we tend to think about? No, absolutely not. And here's an example where it doesn't. The subject on here, my best man, walking the field. We're out for a walk one day, and my lead-in line is the path, but it's off-center. Hey, it happens to be on a third line or thereabouts, and so's the horizon and my subject. And see how these different compositional elements work together to make the image work. Now, here's a question for you. Are these lead-in lines or not? I'm not sure on this one. This is one I've always ummed and ahed about, whether I would call it lead-in lines or not. Because what's my subject here? My subject is the Bee of the Bang, which is this sculpture which used to be outside the Commonwealth Games Stadium, now the Manchester City home ground. It got dismantled because the spikes kept falling off it. But this was just before they dismantled it. And I created this photo, made this photo, actually did sell it as well. I sold the canvas of that. And that shot, the whole thing is the subject, but you could argue that each of these spikes are leading the eye into the center of the bang on there. And again, notice where the center point is, rule of thirds or thereabouts approximately on that. So the eye is being drawn into that all-important center point, the Bee of the Bang, the midpoint of it all. So you could argue it's lead-in. You could argue because the whole thing is the subject that actually there's no lead-in lines there because the whole thing is the subject. Now, I want to look at a couple where it's not a lead-in line. This is not a lead-in line by any means. Why? Because what's our subject? If the subject is the parasol and the items on the rocky beach here, this lead-in line is leading us past it. So always think about a lead-in line as something that's leading you to the subject. If it's leading past the subject or doesn't go to the subject, it is not a lead-in line. You might try and argue that it's leading into the island over here, but no, that's your line, and it's not leading to anything. So in my book, this is not a lead-in line image. And this is one I wanted to come back to based on one of the questions earlier. This, I would say, is not a lead-in line image. You might just argue that there's a lead-in line here leading you to the bursts there. But these are not lead-in lines. They are leading you away from the subject. If you're following them in this direction, they're leading you past. If you're following them all together in the other direction, it's a big arrow. It's leading you down here. It's not leading you to the subject. Now, the reason I put this in is because it's still a good image. And even though it's not using the rule of lead-in lines, it's still a good image. But what's happened here? I might have failed to create a lead-in line image, but what have I done? I've created a strong diagonal. That's a good compositional rule. I've got the bursts on a rule of third. That's a good compositional element. I've got a quirky angle. That's a good compositional element. So basically, I've easily got 3 rules of composition here, even though I've failed to use one, or I've broken one of them. And just to show the opposite way, this one, yes, these are lead-in lines, and these lines are leading us to the bursts of light on there. But it's not a good image compared to the other one. The one that broke the rules, or didn't follow the rules, ended up being the better image than the one... oh, I forgot to update the caption on there. I was copying and pasting these as I was creating them. That should say the lead-in lines going to the fireworks. Oops. But yeah, this one follows the rules, but isn't as strong as the one that doesn't. So make your own minds up about that. And the final image I want to talk about, this is all about using multiple rules in an image. And here we've got all 3 rules of composition that we've talked about tonight brought together. Our subject here is arguably the pyramid, and we've got lead-in lines. We've got, arguably, it's also the viaduct, and we've got the framing, the pyramid's framing the viaduct, and we've got rule of thirds so that the horizon's on a third line, the train's on a third line. We've got all 3 techniques brought together in one composition there. Did I think about all 3 of them when I made it? Well, sort of. It was a conscious decision to frame the pyramid within the viaduct, and those always were going to be lead-in lines because I was there to do light trails. And the obvious position for the top of the viaduct, well, it was about the 3rd line anyway. So yeah, I sort of did on that one. So yeah, working them all together. And there's a challenge for you. If you take up my challenge of creating over the next couple of weeks or the next week, 1 image for each of those rules, try and do a 4th one that brings all 3 rules together in 1 image. See whether you can manage that. Those of you who are local to Stockport, you now know exactly where to go to do it. So right, let's head back to chat and see what's been going on there. And I don't think very much. No new questions in chat on this. So nothing else really for me to talk about in terms of Q&A. So time for me to wrap up. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for the questions. I'll deal with your question in a few weeks' time, Walter, about golden ratios and the like. And if you found it useful and you feel you want to say thank you in a financial way, the link, as ever, is on the screen there. No obligation, obviously, for this, and I'm very, very grateful for everyone who has contributed, and especially to Graham for tonight's cuppa. Right, I will get sent out my inspiration sheet on lead-in lines, which covers some of the topics I've been talking about tonight. That will go out to everyone who's bought me a cuppa and has got credit on that. So that's there. And now to answer the big question, the member photo of the week. Drum roll, please. Tonight's member photo of the week is, I'm going with this one from Bernard Robinson. I just liked, I mean, we've had a few of these water droplets on glass shots, but I rather liked this one in that the droplets were spread out horizontal rather than vertical on it. And I don't know whether that was because it was a windy day or whether he was doing something else with it, but really liked that one. So well done, Bernard. I don't know whether you're watching live or going to be watching on the replay, but congratulations. I'll change the image as soon as I'm off air. So thank you for that. And folks, keep submitting images to the Facebook group to be in with a chance for your image being the image of the week next week. And talking of next week, on Wednesday we have a feedback session. If you've got images you'd like me to talk about, please send them to feedback@ians-studio.co.uk or post them to the Facebook group, but my preference and my priority is always the ones to feedback at. I will deal with those first. And then next Sunday, a few weeks ago, I did a session on posing your subject, all about guidelines for posing. That was session 1. I'm now going to do session 2. We're going to look at some additional techniques on that. Please post portrait images to the Facebook group, or if you want me to give feedback on them, email them to me at feedback@ians-studio.co.uk. So thank you everyone for watching and taking part and being active in the chat, and for hitting the like button and all that. If you haven't already, please go and hit it. So thank you everyone, and until next time, as ever, keep making great images. Bye for now. Right, time to do the standard cut down ending for this. So thanks for watching this live stream from Ian's studio, all about composition. Hope you found it helpful. The full version is now over in my academy, so please consider joining the academy. It's only £6 a month or £60 a year, and lots of resources there, as well as the full live stream. So thanks for watching, and until next time, keep making great images. Bye for now.